Hi, I'm Mike Train, Chief Sustainability Officer and Senior Vice President at Emerson. I'd like to start by thanking The Economist and their staff for organizing this event, which is an important series of discussions in the lead up to the COP26 summit taking place in just a few weeks. The momentum around these types of conversations have been gathering steam for some time, but it truly feels like we have reached an inflection point in the climate conversation. I am pleased to be a part of the dialogue today and participate in important discussions in Glasgow in November. More importantly, I'm proud to play a role in helping to create the solutions we must collaboratively develop and implement to address the incredible challenges ahead of us. Before I jump into the topic at hand, I wanted to share a little bit about Emerson and the role we're playing in the overall effort to support decarbonization and emissions reduction across industries, including energy, industrial, and residential markets. At Emerson, our purpose is to drive innovation that makes the world healthier, safer, smarter, and more sustainable. So this discussion regarding the role of digital technology and automation to achieve a more sustainable future is not only a personal passion of mine as Chief Sustainability Officer, but at the core of what we strive to achieve as a company. The industries we serve are evolving quickly, both in response to and to stay ahead of shifts in the global landscape, as well as increasing consumer demands for sustainable and socially responsible business practices. With that in mind, our focus on sustainability as a company is shaped by a platform we describe as the greening of, the greening by, and greening with Emerson. In our greening of portion, we focus on the environmental sustainability within the four walls of Emerson. That means we are continuously looking at ways to create efficiencies in our own operations with the intent of decreasing emissions across our entire global manufacturing footprint. Greening by Emerson is how we partner with our customers across industries to apply our solutions, whether it be the adoption of digital technology, automation solutions, or improving energy use by identifying waste and by optimizing unit and equipment performance with real-time monitoring solutions to help our customers meet their own sustainability goals. And finally, greening with Emerson is our way of embracing and promoting collaboration across the private and public sector by sharing best practices, engaging in discussions with policymakers, academics, and NGO partners to ensure the application of policies and research reflect the needs and abilities of the industries where we operate. It is our belief that in order to promote environmental sustainability at the scale needed to achieve the 2050 goals set forth by the Paris Agreement, our most critical role is to remain focused on all three areas simultaneously to ensure best practices can be applied within our company and across the value chain where we have a presence. So as I think about the role a company like Emerson can play in this conversation, I often reflect on what things will really look like in 2050. What will we be saying to each other 30 years from now? Will we have reached our commitments, taken the appropriate steps, and avoided a climate crisis? Or will we have let the size of the challenge and the daunting nature of what real change can look like hinder our efforts at a global level? I'm an optimist, so I am confident we can collaboratively embrace the right technologies, some of which exist today and some that will require our best global minds to invent or improve upon, and promote the best path forward to focus on decarbonization across sectors that will lead to the emissions reduction and sustainable environments we are collectively looking to achieve. In my almost 30 years with Emerson, I've worked with leaders across the energy and power industries to transform from analog to digital technologies, helping to ensure our operational excellence and improve performance for critical industries across the globe. When I think back to the transformation we've seen over that time, some of the advancements happened swiftly as technology became easier to access and cheaper to implement. But when you think about the complexity of the systems and the investments required to evolve our energy systems at scale, it's important to remember that many of these changes do not happen overnight. So as we look ahead to the world in 2050, what are the challenges we must overcome? And what are the most realistic solutions we can begin to apply today to create the future we all want to see in 30 years? Let's start with the basics. We all know the challenges we face, and unfortunately, while we create solutions to today's most pressing problems, there are challenges ahead that will make the landscape more difficult even as we implement the most sustainable solutions we have today. The first is we may have billions more people living on the planet than we have right now. We'll continue to see population growth, but perhaps more importantly, we will see this growth in markets that have historically not had access to or not required the levels of electricity that we see today. So we must prepare for the growth of emerging markets and look at ways to address the need for reliable electrical power generation that produces lower emissions, especially in these growing markets where it is not readily available or cost prohibitive. The next challenge we must acknowledge is energy storage. We have trillions of dollars in existing energy infrastructure that we need to adapt and upgrade to provide a future state that is both reliable and more secure, but also embraces more sustainable, renewable forms of energy. This is an incredibly important area where progress continues to occur, but real investment and public-private collaboration will continuously be required to make changes at real scale. From our perspective, this is where global conversations at forums such as COP26 can be so critical to creating a common roadmap that can be applied at the regional, and local level. This really must be addressed from a global perspective that takes into account regional differences and realities. And finally, the world is wrestling with the impact of greenhouse gas and fugitive emissions. Beyond the challenges we must face head on, I think it's also important to take a moment to look at our current energy mix and where we are today with our energy complex. To explain this, I like to look at this diagram, the Sankey diagram, which is produced by the Lawrence Livermore Labs, which is part of the US Department of Energy, and it represents the US energy complex. Now, while this particular chart is US focused, for the sake of conversation, I like to use it as a proxy for the global energy complex. As we look at this diagram, if you go down the left-hand side of the chart, you'll see all of the primary major sources of energy. You have oil, coal, nuclear, natural gas, solar, wind, hydro, etc. What's interesting to look at is that this chart adds up to 100 quads or 100 quadrillion BTUs. So you can kind of look at the chart as percentages to get a pretty quick grasp and understanding of where we are today. If you move to the middle of the chart, that's where you start to see the conversions and where we take these sources of energy and convert them into electricity through the power generation processes. As you move along further into the chart, you can see the uses of this energy: industrial, commercial, residential, and transportation, which are all significant categories of use in their own right. And finally, on the right-hand side of this chart is a depiction of the efficiency of our system. When you really look at it, only a relatively small portion, about 1/3 of the energy we introduce into the system, is actually used for the purpose we are asking it to do. Things like heat our homes, or power our cars, or power our cities, or ensure our food and other essential items can be transported to where it needs to go and be kept safe for consumption. Unfortunately, that means 2/3 of the energy is lost in the process of moving it through the system. This comes from waste, heat going through our windows, the braking on our cars, and several other factors. With that level setting in mind, and as we contemplate the system we have today, how do we realistically get to net zero as a world by 2050? And what steps can we begin to take now to ensure we stay on a positive and real path to this reality? In my conversations with policymakers and industry executives around the globe, we see four major strategies. Call them the 4 E's for an energy transition to a lower carbon future. The first is energy source decarbonization. Second is emissions management. The third is electrification. And finally, energy efficiency. If we start with energy source decarbonization, this is where we look at how we can insert more renewable energy sources into our energy mix. Solar, wind, hydro, nuclear. This is easier in some parts of the world than others, but the continued adoption of these renewable energy sources will be critical as we balance our overall energy mix. This is also an opportunity for us as an industry to take advantage of digital tools and technologies that help us reduce waste in the system. It also means that looking how we can take this waste, including agricultural waste or landfill waste, and convert it into a biogas or a biofuel. This is an area Emerson has evolved in around the world, and it's very exciting to see the potential here. With the second E, emissions management, this is where we really have the opportunity to use our sensing, management, control capabilities, software, and advanced data to make sure we minimize and optimize our energy systems reduce emissions moving forward. In this category, you also need to think about refrigerants and continue to move toward low GWP refrigerants or even natural refrigerants such as carbon dioxide or propane in our future refrigeration and air conditioning systems. As I mentioned earlier, not only will this be an important challenge for us to address today with the current population mix in cities around the world, but become increasingly more important and perhaps challenging as global temperatures fluctuate in parts of the world that didn't require the level of heating or cooling that they may have seen in the future. This is also true when we consider the ongoing need for the movement of food and agricultural goods that are essential for any type of quality of life in these emerging markets. Of the items we're discussing today, the application of existing sensing and control capabilities is a real solution that we can and are applying today, and a section of the industry where continued advancements in digital technologies can help maximize the current infrastructure we have in place. And then, of course, we have the one that is gaining a lot of attention, which is carbon capture and storage, where we can abate a particular process, capture the carbon dioxide, and appropriately manage it after that. Here we can think about two of the most likely potential use cases. One, we find a way to return these carbon dioxide molecules to something usable in a product form. Or two, we put it back beneath the Earth's crust where it came from. Emerson has been involved in some of the early discussions around this topic as the industry looks at ways to achieve this at scale. Next, if we look at electrification and grid management, we have a couple of different strategies and ways to look at that. The first one is replacing combustion with an electrified process, such as a heat pump. This is where you use an electrified process that provides heating or cooling with an all-electric technology. Some of this technology has been around for decades, but there's been renewed interest in it again recently as companies and citizens are looking for viable alternatives to traditional combustion resources for residential, commercial, and transportation markets. This heat pump technology is a really interesting one for us at Emerson. We've actually been working on a project with a company called Hydro-Quebec, a large power utility in eastern Canada, on a solution that combines our industrial compressors with our measurement and control expertise to provide a new sustainable heat pump technology that has the potential to deliver large capacity heating, cooling, and hot water to commercial buildings using renewable sources. The second item in this category is around grid management and making the electrical grid smarter so it can handle all these various distributed energy sources coming on and off the grid intermittently and manage them appropriately. And finally, I think it's important to acknowledge that there will still be molecules in the world, and the infrastructure we have in place with pipelines and terminals are still going to need to be moving products that we need, even if what's being transported evolves from oil to hydrogen or even water. And finally, the last strategy we look at is at energy efficiency. And we believe that this is the most important strategy overall. Think for a moment about the role automation plays in our lives and the increasing amount of data and analytics we have at our fingertips. In the energy sector in particular, we've seen an incredible uptick, even in the past year and a half, in the use of digital tools and technology that makes our systems far more efficient simply by taking advantage of smarter grids, innovative products, and technologies that are designed to maximize resource efficiency. We're seeing this in major commercial industrial processes, but we're also seeing it in the homes and residences of people in many cities around the globe through the use of smarter thermostats and HVAC systems that help to reduce energy load on power plants during peak usage times to minimize the impact on the grid. Within the efficiency category, I would also note the importance of people, workers around the globe who use these digital tools and technologies to drive the process and make our systems work as efficiently as possible. The fact is, we could have the best technology and automation possible, but without the real-world understanding and application of these digital tools, we can have a real opportunity lost. This is why we spend so much time talking about the importance of skilling or reskilling to ensure that people who are using these tools can get the very most out of what is available to them. You know, as an engineer who's been intimately involved with the operation sides of our business and critical industries around the world for many years, it's hard not to think about the climate challenge without thinking about it from a process standpoint. We're facing the biggest challenge of our lifetimes, but when you consider the technology that exists today and the continued investments, innovation, and opportunity to embrace digital solutions that make our systems smarter, combined with the growing importance in using renewable energy at scale, The road to true decarbonization seems more tangible and realistic to achieve. But unless we all do our part today to collaboratively work to implement the innovations and technologies at our fingertips, we'll look back at this as a moment lost. As I mentioned earlier, I remain optimistic that when we reflect back in 2050 on the steps we take now, we will be able to achieve the future our kids and grandkids expect all of us to create. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and look forward to seeing many of you in a few weeks in Glasgow. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.